Good morning, dear colleagues. Welcome online on this hopefully beautiful Friday morning, wherever you are. We are getting participants ready to join for this call, for this webinar, for this meeting on behavioral insights. So just seeing the numbers increasing. So before we open up the content, let's just give a couple more seconds to for people to fully come in and register. Okay, let's dive in since we have quite a nice but also busy schedule for the morning. Let me start by quickly opening the opening slides and brief intro presentation. Again, a very good morning, all colleagues online and also in the panel as speakers. Before introducing the agenda and also the nice lineup of speakers we have today, allow us quickly to introduce you to a bit of the background and the context of this webinar this morning. A webinar as said on the behavioral insights that we planned as the OECD Sigma team as the closing one before summer in a series of 3. Previously, and some of the colleagues online might have already joined in also into the other 2, within the context of the general topic of what we call service delivery and digital, we have organized within Sigma 2 previous webinars. One that was specifically focusing on the Western Balkans as one of the topical geographical areas we are working in. We'll come back to this in a second. Dedicated to digital government. Then we had another one 2 weeks ago where we zoomed in particularly on the aspect of the citizen satisfaction, so understanding and improving citizen satisfaction, which both of the sessions actually, if you have an interest in knowing more, all of the information, including the full recording, is available on our Sigma website. So if you'd like to go back in watching some of them or both of them, and also finding the materials in terms of presentations that were done, you can find all of this on our website. Leading us to today, the third one, the third in line, as said, dealing with the behavioral insights. Just for the colleagues online who are not that familiar with who we are as the OECD Sigma program, we are a program which is a joint effort between the European Union and the OECD. So we are hosted by the OECD in Paris, but we are principally funded by the EU, with the prime objective, the overall objective, to support public governance reforms and to strengthen the capacity of public administrations in the 3 geographical regions where we are mandated to work. 3 geographical regions and 19 countries overall. So first of all, we are fully active in the Western Balkans and Turkey, so all the economies in that region we are actively working with and on. Secondly, we're also very much active in the Eastern Partnership region, and we'll come back to this because this was the background in which we also launched this particular topic on behavioral insights. But my good colleague and friend Hachik will tell you a bit more about this. So in the 5 Eastern Partnership countries, we are also fully active. And then we are also very active in the what is called the European Southern neighborhood. So as you can see, the 7 countries in the south, or sometimes referred to as the MENA region as well, we are also fully active. Just saying this because we know that we have colleagues registered from countries, economies from all the 3 geographical regions. What we do basically is that we're active around 6 thematic or topical areas. So we're, as said, trying to promote good governance or public administration reform in these 6 overall areas. It's about the overall strategy and improving public administration. It's about the dedicated topic, and here we already come closer to behavioral insights as well when it comes to policy development and coordination. Then we are very much focusing also on the HR, so the public service and the human resource management. We're working also on accountability, oversight, and the organization of public administration. Then the service delivery and digital. This is the area where myself, together with colleague José Diaz, who is also with us here, is responsible for. And then we have the public financial management, including public procurement. All of this we have bundled, and this is where most of the colleagues might know us from, in what we call the principles of public administration. So the principles are a framework of standards that has been developed by ourselves within Sigma, but in close collaboration with the wider OECD and EU. And these principles are, on the one hand, a kind of policy framework, so a kind of guidance for public administrations, countries, to really use them as guidance and where to go to really build up strong, efficient, effective public administrations. But also these principles are used as the assessment framework, because in most of the countries where we are active, we are using these principles to do our monitoring. Again, a kind of a benchmark against we are assessing the countries in the context also of the accession towards the EU. All of this you can find on our website, all of the principles, all of the materials as the policy framework, but also the whole screening methodology, the assessment methodology, you can find for sure in one of your languages fully online. If you have any questions later on this, always feel free to reach out, and happy to provide you with more information. So all of these general principles and all of these topics translated into overall different 32 in general principles within this framework. And also of, I think, most relevance for today, besides the policy development one, is for sure the user-centric one. So the whole topic of service delivery and digital, where, and I think this is crucial for today, where we see the service delivery one as really as starting from this user centricity. And so public administration that really puts the users, whoever they are, as individual ones, as groups of users or businesses, really putting the users at the center and delivering high quality and easy accessible service, being it online, offline, to all people and businesses. So that's a bit the mantra of what we are trying to do, trying to achieve as the policy objective with this service delivery principle. And this is then also how we build up all of that. Colleagues that are a bit familiar with what we're doing in Sigma, they might have seen this overall key elements for improving service delivery principle slide. So this is basically all of the thinking that we have behind the principles. So really starting from understanding users' needs and expectations. We will come back to this for sure today when all the different colleagues are speaking, also what they're doing on the behavioral insights. So really, first of all, understanding needs and expectations and behavior before diving into working on improving processes, procedures, working on accessibility, bringing also digital, and also measuring and committing. I will not go into this into details now, because as said, we have explored this in other webinars in more full details. Again, if ever you have questions or have a specific interest, always feel free to reach out. We're happy to provide you with way more details. Before diving into the agenda and also introducing the speakers of today, allow me to pass the floor, the screen, the mic to my good friend and colleague Rachik Yarmolan from the GIZ, because we are teaming up with the GIZ specifically in the Eastern Partnership region. And I think it's a good moment for Rach to pass a couple of words and also on our collaboration, particularly in the East, but also of relevance for the other regions. So please, Rach, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you so much, dear Nick, for passing the floor and for a beautiful intro. I think very important. Dear colleagues, dear friends, esteemed participants, please allow me also to welcome you in this very important webinar on behalf of German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, in commission of which we have been implementing with the GIZ, German Development Cooperation, we have been implementing projects in all over like 120 countries in the world. And of course, governance sphere is one of the focus areas for us for the development cooperation. And under that sphere, public administration plays, of course, crucial role as a fundamental. And as already mentioned by Nick, we had the pleasure already in the end of 2022 to approach our colleagues, our friends from OECD Sigma, and offer opportunity of cooperation, collaboration, having in mind that the Sigma program by OECD and European Union is the program that is developing the principles of public administration, which is, of course, fundamental for the countries also in the Eastern Partnership in their efforts and endeavors for alignment with the European Union standards and models. And we had very successfully implemented already one phase of cooperation until 2024, and we were happy to launch the second phase of the cooperation with OECD Sigma, and had also the pleasure, OECD Sigma, to facilitate the cooperation with wider OECD, having the Department for Governance, having also Behavior Insights team, and so on. For the second phase of our cooperation, which kicked off end of last year, we have been able to underline three strategic directions where we have been already implementing a number of very important initiatives. The first direction, of course, it is to the topic that we are gathered now today. It's service delivery and digital government, as we call it this way. Under this pillar, we have been able to really support jointly development of the community of practice among Eastern Partnership countries on this very important topic, and also have had the support and facilitation by Sigma also to bring even Western Balkans region and even to go beyond and explore opportunities for cooperation also with MENA region. The community of practice creation was facilitated by so-called academies on different topics. And for this second phase, we have already had the pleasure to organize in Paris, in OECD Sigma premises, the first academy on human-centric service design, where it was also the opportunity to have our friends from French public administration, but also OECD Behavioral Insights team, where the input was given there to the Eastern Partnership countries. Really, well, it rose a lot of interest, which means that actually now with this webinar, we want to go a bit one step further and still even to look for opportunities for injecting these practices in the countries. That means exploring opportunities, whether certain projects, certain opportunities for, let's say, piloting, applying these approaches and methods could be used. We are also already in the planning phase for the second academy on the digital. We are also exploring opportunities to do it also jointly with Western Balkans. Second pillar, we call it sustainable quality management approach. And here we are focusing on CAF, but also enabling the countries of Eastern Partnership to have a better overview and understanding in general about the quality management culture and existing standards and models in international practice, and here also with the focus of European Union. And we are so happy that to see that there is such a high uptake of quality management model CAF in the countries of Eastern Partnership. If the time would allow us afterwards, we could share, but we are so happy that this model is already being institutionalized in a number of Eastern Partnership countries, which are joining the European network of CAF users and developing their roadmaps for institutional mainstreaming of this approach. The last and still not the least very important topic is data protection and the need to ensure privacy by design principle within wider public administration processes. And here again, I want to mention and specifically thank also to our colleagues from OECD Sigma, with facilitation of which we have established really very fruitful collaboration with European Union important institutions such as EDPS, European Data Protection Supervisor's Office, and European Data Protection Board, EDPB, as well as European Commission, DigiJust. We had very nice cooperation. And surely the highlight was also already 2 times organized high-level data protection weeks in Brussels, in close collaboration also with Western Balkans, important institutions such as RESPI and RCC. So this is also in the planning phase. This will be the main 3 directions we will be working, 3 of us. Coming to the topic of behavior insights, of course, we have the best professionals who will give and share insights, but from our experience, just to share that very often the countries of the Eastern Partnership, but I would say also Western Balkans and so on, they have a beautiful expertise of developing really great tools. And they have also great experience of having a vast diversity of the e-tools. And still, what is, I think, still something that needs to be worked on is to really promote better uptake of e-tools. And this is where the topic of behavioral insights and understanding the behavior of citizens, of humans, where we want to really to contribute is very crucial. One of our analysis showed, for example, in one of the Eastern Partnership countries, that if a citizen is having not successful experience with usage of e-tool for first time, then the citizen is prone not to make use of e-tools anymore in future, having already this experience. That means, I mean, this is really very crucial to go really deep into behavioral insights. This much, the floor back to you, dear Nick. I hope I was not too long. Thank you.
Perfect, dear Raj. Not too long at all. Thanks for shedding some light on the, indeed, as you said, really, really nice collaboration. And I hope that also the countries present here and the people present here can really testify on this nice collaboration. And this neatly brings us to the topic of today, because it was, as you said, Raj, when we had this academy in Paris, when we had already some of the colleagues as speakers here present today, that we got the feedback from participants. It would be great to deepen out on this topic further. So this is where the need was, let's say, identified, and then we promised to do a follow-up more into detail, a couple of hours. So this is what we are doing now. But then we didn't want to limit this invitation only to the participants of that academy, but we said with such a beautiful agenda, why don't we open up to all? And then we are great to see that we have so many people joining online. I'm trying to move the slides into the agenda, and so then we are slowly moving to the topic and the content. Slowly moving, but really with big interest to hear really some leading experts globally in this area. So I think we are extremely privileged this morning to present to you this agenda. We're first of all happy to introduce to the friends and colleagues within the OECD behavioral science team. So with Chiara Varazzani, with Cameron Knott, and also with Eva Comarillas. Really, we have some top people leading on this area within the OECD, and the colleagues will tell you I think the amazing things that they're dealing with and working on from the side of the OECD, with several of your countries being present. After setting the scene, Mariam Shama will guide us into the fascinating world and work that the colleagues in France are doing on behavioral insights and the user-centric service design. So really looking forward a lot to what Mariam and her team, because Mariam is leading the French Behavioral Insights unit within the ministry, what the colleagues are doing in this regard. Followed up by good colleague Harmik Azarian, who was the head of the within the Information Systems Agency of Armenia, who is the head of the user experience and service delivery team. And so he will share a brief insights on the work that was going on in Armenia, and that will also be taken up. He will be joined, I think, also Araziak is online, also in joining Harmak if needed, on sharing some insights on this. With all of this, we then also hope to have like a good discussion with the participants online. So colleagues, as usual, feel free to note your questions, to put them into the chat if needed. And at the dedicated moments, we will also open up the round tables and the discussion. So in that case, also feel free to raise your virtual hand, and then we're happy to pass the microphone. So with this, I will start sharing my screen, and I would kindly invite Chiara or Cameron to open up your presentation, and then to talk us into the work that you're doing from the behavioral science team within the OECD. So please, colleagues, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Nick. And good morning, everyone. It's really great to see so many of you connected online this morning with us. So we are very excited to kick off this session today and be part of a really fantastic lineup. Let me start with also a big thank you to the great colleagues at Sigma and also our partner, our GIZ. This webinar really builds on a great collaboration that started a few years ago already. And I also wanted to give a special shout out to Mariam and Harmik. Both were part of the very first international Sludge Academy that we launched a couple of years ago. And we are really excited to be together today so that they can share their experiences from France and from Armenia as well. Next slide, please. So what we would like to do today in the next 45 minutes with you is that we will start by really grounding ourselves with a quick introduction into behavioral science. So what it is, why it matters for public policy. Then we will dive into some real world case studies to really show how these ideas can be put into practice in a variety of contexts. And then we will unpack the difference between nudge and sludge and really look at how to spot and reduce frictions in public services. And really along the way, in the next 40 minutes or so, there will be some interactive moments and space for your input. So really be ready to jump in and contribute. Next slide, please. But before we dive in, let me quickly introduce to the brilliant team that is behind much of this work. So I'm really privileged to lead the behavioral science team at the OECD, and we are a multidisciplinary group of people, economists, psychologists, I'm a neuroscientist, policy experts, really working across many different countries and sectors. And our mission is to support public administrations in applying behavioral science in real human-centered and practical ways to improve how government works. So you will hear from some of us today, and in particular from Cameron Knott and from Eva Koromilas. And with this now, Cameron, over to you for the first warm-up activity.
Thank you, Chiara. So it's a pleasure to meet so many of you, and thank you again to everyone for organizing this seminar. We're very excited to share some behavioral science with you this morning. In order to warm everyone up, we wanted to do a very quick poll just to gauge people's prior understanding of behavioral insights or behavioral science, which we're about to go through. And so there are two ways of accessing this poll that we provided. I'd say the most simple is that you can scan with your phone, just get your camera out and read the QR code we have up on the slide here. That will take you to WooClap. So it's an online platform for conducting polls. And I will put up a question for you to answer, which is also here on the slide, just to gauge your prior understanding of behavioral science. Otherwise, you can navigate to wooclap.com and you can simply enter in today's WooClap code, which is Sigma BI, all one word. Now let me jump over to my other screen, and hopefully technology is with me this morning and this will go smoothly. All right, so you should now see the same QR code again. And what I'm now going to do is put the poll up. So for those of you who have your phone or computer on WooClap, you can just answer the poll, indicate what is your prior understanding of behavioral science, what best describes your familiarity with the topic of behavioral science. You say you're new to BI, but you're curious, you are already applying BI in your work, or let's be honest, you're crushing it, like you are a seasoned BI practitioner from way back. Now I'm going to refresh my page so that we can get some early results as people are coming in. And this will also help us gauge sort of, how to pitch our presentation today. How interesting. We have a lot of BI curious people this morning, a few people already applying it in their work, one person already crushing it. I mean, I hope that's one of the behavioral scientists on the call, but it doesn't need to be. So we're seeing a lot of like newness to the topic. A lot of people who come interested to learn. Let me just refresh and see if the distribution changes. No, so it's still the same. Okay, this is good for us to know how we should be pitching the rest of today's session. And so a lot of people may be unfamiliar with behavioral science, but we're going to cover a lot of the foundational behavioral science concepts today just to whet your appetite and also give you a few very fast and frugal frameworks, like easy to use applications of BI that you can apply in your own work. So now I will flip us back to our presentation deck. Excellent. So now allow me to take you through a very quick definition of what is behavioral science and why is it relevant to better government. So some of you may be familiar with the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. For those of you who don't know, Daniel Kahneman is one of the few non-economists to have won the Nobel Prize in economics, quite a feat. And in his work with Amos Tversky, what they found is that broadly speaking, human decision-making, we tend to rely on one of two mental systems that we all have. They describe these as system one and system two. So system one is how our brain operates when we're making very fast, simple, common, or well-known decisions. We use it the vast majority of the time in our lives. So if I give you a math problem like what is 2 + 2, you will just automatically know that it is 4. Like you should have memorized that and you don't need to think too hard about it. Alternatively, we also have a system two, which is a bit more slow, deliberate, and mentally speaking, it's more costly. Like our brain uses more energy to engage our system two processes. And so we're evolved to only use it when absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we're spending energy on hard mental tasks that don't require, a more deliberative system two approach. But if I was to ask you something like, what is 13 times 7? If you're anything like me, that will not come automatically. And so you will need to engage your system two. You will feel your brain working harder to actually work through that math problem. That is your system two working. And the important insight here is that when we're using our system one, even though it tends to be more fast, more cost efficient for our brain to use it, the heuristices or the rules of thumb, if you will, the mental shortcuts that it uses to be so cost efficient, it doesn't get things right all of the time. It gets things right most of the time, but there are some interesting irrationalities that might creep in, although I think that's maybe a bit of a loaded term, but there are certain patterns or pitfalls that might creep in when you're using your system one, such as an over-reliance on defaults. So we tend to go with the automatic choice wherever possible because it tends to be the easier choice. We tend to feel losses more keenly than we feel equivalent gains. And so we have a loss aversion built into our psychology. We tend to be overly optimistic about the future. We tend to rely too much on seeing what other people are doing and just going along and conforming. So social norms are very powerful. And we also find that our intentions do not automatically translate into our actions. And so there is an intention action gap. These are all elements of our system one way of thinking. A really good way that we can use system one is demonstrated in this case study by Richard Thaler and colleagues. So we know there's a common behavioral bias around people not saving enough money for retirement. And this is something that when you ask people, they say that they do intend to save more money for retirement, but then they don't actually follow through. They try to spend more of their paycheck in the moment and say, I'll save more in the future. And so this is a good example of present bias, and it's a good example of the intention action gap at play. And so in order to address this, the researchers worked with some financial advisors and a large manufacturing company in the US, where they asked employees how much they were saving for their retirement. And for those that were saving too little by their own estimations, they invited them to have a meeting with a financial consultant. And the financial consultant would recommend they join a savings program called Save More Tomorrow, or SMART for short. And the idea with SMART is I would say, look, you don't need to start saving more for your retirement now, but you'll commit to when you have your next pay rise, you will give a disproportionate amount of that pay rise to your retirement savings. So as you get more pay rises over your career, you gradually increase the proportion of your income that you're setting aside for your pension. And what they found is that the workers who did not meet with the consultant at all, they maintained the same pension saving rate that they always had, which was just over 6%. For those who met the consultant but declined to join the program, they saw an increase in their savings rate. Only once, though. At subsequent paychecks, they did not follow through. So it had a one-time bump, but no long-term change. But then for those who joined the program, which created a new default, which was saying when you get a pay rise, the default is that a greater proportion of your pay rise will now go into your retirement savings. You can leave that program at any time. So we're not forcing you to stay with this plan, but the default has changed from keeping it constant, how much you're saving, to increasing it over time. And just by changing that default, we saw that over 3 separate pay rises, we almost doubled the rate at which people were setting aside their paycheck for their pension. And so this closed the intention income action gap by using defaults in a very smart way. And so there are many such insights like this, and also many such research projects like this. So we evaluated the impact of this default and saw it was very effective. And so the short summary, if you get caught at a dinner party and need to explain behavioral science, is you can say it is both a body of knowledge. It is the behavioral insights around defaults, loss aversions, whatever it may be. And it's also these research methods. It's a way of evaluating the impact of these changes on how people make their decisions. You don't necessarily need to do both of them together in a BI project, but the best value is when you combine them. And that's why I give it a big thumbs up if you can get those two elements of a BI project together. So that's a very quick review of behavioral science. I now hand to Chiara to unpack a little bit more about how we support policymakers and civil servants to apply that.
Thank you so much, Cameron. I hope that was a good, very quick introduction to behavioral science. And now I would like to tell you a little bit more about the specific work that we lead at the OECD, so from the international space. Next slide, please. So we'd like to say that the OECD Behavioral Science team has 3 main missions. So we convene a global network of experts in behavioral science in governments, which is called BRAIN, or Behavioral Research in Action International Network. We also enable the use of behavioral science in governments with things like tools and trainings and standards. And finally, the third part is really the advice work, where we support and guide governments in practice to apply behavioral science to specific policy challenges. So I will walk you through these 3 different dimensions of our work with some quick examples. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to start by saying that this is a growing community. In the last map of behavioral science teams around the world, we mapped over 300 units in 63 countries applying behavioral science to public policy. So this is, I think we published this in 2024 and it's already outdated. And so this is why we also built a digital infrastructure, which is more interactive. So next slide, please. We have a digital infrastructure, which is an interactive map of behavioral insights units that you can see on the link online. And here we'll find all the different experts and the different governments around the world applying behavioral science to specific projects. And we also have a project platform. So if you're curious to explore a little bit more some examples and filter projects according to your areas of interest, it's something that you can do online. And we also have a pre-registration portal for governments to share their work early on, even before starting to collect data, so that we can share knowledge and do comparative analysis of applications early on at an international level. Next slide, please. I just wanted to also say a little bit more about the Behavioral Research in Action International Network, or BRAIN for short. This is really a space for us to do knowledge sharing, but also expert peer learning and comparative analysis of behavioral science capacity across countries. Next slide, please. This is a very large community now. It's actually the largest community of behavioral science in government in the world. We count 58 countries now and more than 500 government officials. We launched this in 2021. We are very lucky to have France with Mariam Chamat and Lauren Conway from the Canadian Privy Council chairing this group of experts. And we are fortunate to have many in-kind contributions and financial contributions from governments all around the world to really sustain this work. Next slide, please. This work also is something that we try to renew from time to time. So every 2 years, following the program of work of the OECD, we work with informal working groups within BRAIN, because it's very big. And for the next biennium, so 2025-2026, we chose 6 different priority areas, from public service improvement with sludge reduction down to AI use in the public sector. And so this is really something that we are prioritizing for the next couple of years. And of course, this might change for the biennium 2027-2028. Next slide, please. The second role that we have, it's about the enabling part. And here, really what we do is that we have a lot of fun in sharing and collecting the best practices around the world and trying to resume these in very practical toolkits that are freely available online for anybody to use. And also we do training and capacity building tailored to governments depending on where you are in your journey. And of course, we also provide supports in setting up new behavioral science functions, especially in governments where they do not have a behavioral science team yet. My colleagues Cameron and Eva will share some of these frameworks. So Cameron will do a deep dive quickly in the basic toolkit. And next slide, please. Eva will walk you through the fixing friction reports about sludge reduction on sludge, and Eva will tell you more about this later on. Next slide, please. The last part that I wanted to share with you is one single example from one of the projects we have been leading. So we worked on many different policy areas and with many different governments around the world. But one thing that we really love to do is multi-country projects, which means trying to put together multiple countries working on the same challenge to really think together about potential solution and test them with real evidence. And so today I wanted to share with you an experiment that we did in collaboration with the Canadian government and the French government on misinformation. Next slide, please. So this is the report that you can, again, download when you want. But really, this was an experiment we conducted to try and reduce the spread of fake news online. Next slide, please. Very briefly, what we did is that we created 2 different interventions online in a digital environment to really try to reduce the spread of misinformation online. And you see an example on the left and one on the right. So we have 2 different intervention types. We have one scenario where we just prompted people with what is called an accuracy prompt to try to put them in a space where they were nudged to think about accuracy and the veracity of specific news. And then on the right, in orange, you see a more active prompt that we will come up before they will see fake news. And participants will see a brief list of media literacy tips, such as check the evidence or be skeptical about headlines, and really short tips like this. Next slide, please. Just wanted to show you very briefly the trial design that we chose. So this was done by the Canadian government, and the full sample size was almost 2,000 Canadians. And all participants saw the same headlines. Some of them were true, and some of them were false. And then we will ask them, to what extent do you think this is true? And also we would ask them, would you like to share this on your social media accounts? Next slide, please. The first finding with this experiment, which was quite shocking at the time, was that some individuals may share news even when they do not believe them to be true. So you can see on the left the accuracy beliefs. So people are quite good at disentangling what's true and false. But then when you ask them, would you like to share this? Many people say actually yes, even if sometimes they do not believe the fake news, which is a very interesting behavioral insight. Next slide, please. I wanted to share with you the results of the experiment. So as I told you, we have a control group, but also we have two different prompts. One was an accuracy prompt, and the other one was these digital literacy tips. And I would like to ask you in the chat, if you have access to the chat, would like to for you to tell us which prompt do you think worked best. If the control one, so no prompt at all, was the best one, you can just put 1 or gray in the chat. Or if you think that the blue one was the best, you can put the blue or the second, number 2, or the digital media literacy tips. Let's see if we have, I'm not sure if people have access to the chat. We have people raising their hands, but maybe, unfortunately, it doesn't seem they have access, but it's okay. I will share the results anyway for the sake of time. So next slide, please. What we discovered is that the digital media literacy tips worked the best. So both treatments were very effective in reducing the share of fake news online. Next slide, please. But what we found is that the tips had the greatest impact on online users. And we found that these reduced intention to share fake news by 21%, which is a pretty amazing results. And we were very happy about it. Next slide, please. We also had a look at why people share misinformation online. And we found something very interesting. I don't want to share all the details about this analysis, but basically we found that not only, of course, people are influenced by their social background and by demographic, income, etc., but the thing that explained the most the behaviors was actually some cognitive factors, such as the openness to evidence, conspiracy mentality, and resistance to new evidence presented. And so we found that this really was very strong in predicting how people then behave online. So next slide. So this is the summary for this piece of research on misinformation. First, we found that some individuals, as I show you, share news that they do not believe. Second, we found that the tips on digital media literacy had the greatest impact on online users, reducing intentions to share fake news by 21%. And finally, we found that cognitive factors, including trust and the information that we consume, really shape the beliefs and the sharing of misinformation online. I hope that this was a good example to share with you. And now over to Cameron to share even more examples with you to make this more concrete. Over to you, Cameron.
Thank you, Chiara. And I think what I'm about to share with all of you, some of you may see the connections, like the behavioral frameworks in this work fighting misinformation. So we didn't want to just give you a whole bunch of case studies. We also wanted to provide you with a framework that you might be able to take away from today's session and already start thinking about how behavioral science might be relevant and applicable to policy challenges that you're working on at the moment. And so we wanted to share with you our ABCD framework, which is part of the OECD's basic toolkit itself, another acronym, for how we go about applying behavioral science in policy. And ABCD, what it stands for are key barriers or enablers to people changing their behavior in a policy relevant way. And so the A is for attention, where when we think about how we get people to do something, we want to make sure that the most important information is the most attention grabbing in that sense. So if we're asking people to do something, is our ask of them attention grabbing? Can they even see it amidst the flurry of information that is always fighting for their attention these days? We talk about beliefs. So people make beliefs and estimations about themselves and the world. And sometimes those beliefs may be miscalibrated or incorrect. And so if we correct those beliefs or give people more accurate information, they might change their behavior as a result. We want to think about the context in which people are making choices. And just to give you a bit of background, I'm a social psychologist by training, so I'm all about group dynamics. And so I would always talk about conformity as the C that is most relevant to me, but there are other contextual cues here. But we want to think about the situation in which people are making a choice and how that shapes their decision and their behavior. And then finally, we want to talk about determination. So what is their motivation for doing the behavior or not doing the behavior? And can we heighten or enhance certain motivations and deprioritize other motivations? And so we'll share with you some case studies just to illustrate this framework. When we talk about attention, this is one of my favorite trials. So if you haven't detected already, I'm Australian, and this was a trial that was run in Australia, in Sydney. And what we were finding in behavioral science there is that people who were issued with a traffic fine, so they were speeding or they ran a red light, either way, they would have to pay a fine to make amends for their violation. And quite a number of people were not paying their fine. And so even though it was being sent by the government, explaining that it was necessary for them to do this and there would be penalties if they did not, many people were not paying their fine. And so the New South Wales Behavioural Insights Unit, they reviewed the letter that was being sent to people who had to pay these fines. And what they found is that the key thing we were asking, which was to pay the fine, was not particularly attention grabbing. The letter, which you can see in the middle, it was very legalistic. There was a lot of text. Not all of it was relevant to paying the fine. And so what the Behavioural Insights Unit did there is they redesigned the letter to make the most important information more attention grabbing. And you can see this on the right-hand side of the page. So we made it clear that they needed to pay a fine, whereas before it just sounded like an enforcement order where maybe they don't need to do anything. The enforcement will be done to them without any action. And then making it very clear what it is that they needed to pay and how they would do that. I would also just mention, I know from the project team working on this, there were some legal requirements about what information must be included on the letter. And so it was very hard to de-emphasize that. But they did a bit of digging and they discovered that, well, there's nothing in the law that says what font that text must be written in, or how big the font must be, or what side of the page it must be on. So they were able to take all of that legal information that was necessary but not required for paying the fine and put in a very small font on the back of the letter, so you can't even see all of it. But that way it de-emphasized the unimportant information and made the important information more attention grabbing. And so they ran this as a randomized controlled trial. And what they found is that the redesigned letter increased the rate at which these fines were being paid by, I think it was about 3.2 percentage points. And so by redesigning the letter to make it more attention grabbing, we saw a marked increase in people doing the behavior. When we talk about beliefs, so one of my favorite studies from the US was looking at people's miscalibrated beliefs about how fast they drive their cars and how good they are at handling dangerous corners. So this is a infamous corner in the city of Chicago. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse moving, but in the bottom right of the image, we can see this turn or this corner on the road. And this was a very infamous turn in Chicago because it had many car crashes because drivers were approaching it too quickly. They needed to slow down. They did not. They overestimated their ability to handle a difficult corner. And so there were a number of car crashes. And what the city government did, which is very clever, is you may be able to see these vertical lines that have been painted on the road. And this is actually tapping into our visual perception system because one of the ways the brain estimates how fast we're moving in a car is they look at how quickly a stationary object moves past your car as you're driving it. And so the lines on the road, they disappear underneath the front of the car as you drive it, and how quickly they disappear under the front of your car. Your brain uses that to estimate how quickly your car is moving. And so as they approach the corner, the lines actually get closer and closer together, so they disappear under the front of your car more quickly, which makes your brain think, oh, I've actually sped up. I'm going faster. I need to tap the brake and slow down the car. And this optical illusion, it prompts a lot of drivers to gently slow down their car before they approach the corner, and then it drastically reduced the number of car accidents because we sort of corrected their mistaken belief about how fast they were going by making them realize, actually, you're going faster than you think you are, you should slow down, and therefore it reduced the number of traffic accidents. We also want to think about choice or the context or the conformity that people may be drawing on when they make a decision. This was another study from the US where they were looking at a problem of a national park where people go to see petrified wood. This is like wood that is trees that are so old, they've turned to stone. And to be honest, I feel like that some days. But what they were finding is that a lot of people were stealing parts of the petrified wood, and they wanted to reduce the stealing because if everyone does it, then eventually there won't be any petrified wood for people to see at the park. And the park already had a sign. It was telling people not to take any wood. And what the researchers wanted to do was to see whether they could change the wording on that sign to make it more effective and to reduce the proportion of people who were taking the petrified wood. And so we had the control group message or the standard message. This is in red. We then had a message that tapped into like the descriptive norm, describing what is the actual behavior that people tend to do, because when we know what most people are doing, we have a natural tendency to try and fit in with that. And it said, please don't remove, I'll jump ahead. The green one is many past visitors have removed petrified wood from the park, changing the natural state of the petrified forest. So this was the descriptive norm. It's describing that many past visitors have done this behavior. And then in the middle, we have an injunctive norm, which is a slightly different version of a norm. This is not saying what everyone does do. It's saying, what does everyone think we should do in this case? So it's an injunction rather than a description. And it just simply said, please don't remove petrified wood from the park in order to preserve its natural beauty. Now, I always like to ask people to make an estimate or a guess of which one they think is going to be the most effective. Is it going to be the control group? Is it going to be the descriptive norm? Or is it going to be the injunctive norm? So write down your answers. So the answer is that the injunctive norm, oh, sorry, I think I tried to change. Oh, no, sorry, this is right. So the injunctive norm was far and away the most effective. It had the lowest rate of theft of any petrified wood in the forest. It was more effective than the control message. But what was really interesting is that the descriptive social norm, it actually backfired. So it actually normalized and permitted people to take more wood because it said many other visitors have already taken petrified wood. And even though it said, so please don't do it, people thought, well, if everyone else is doing it, I don't feel so bad about stealing some wood for myself. And so we reinforced the wrong norm in the descriptive condition, but in the injunctive condition, it reinforced the right norm, which is do not take any petrified wood. And so by choosing the sort of the correct norm for the context or the choice that people were making, we could drastically reduce the proportion of people who were stealing petrified wood. And now finally, when we think about the D in ABCD for determination, we often just need to help people be a little bit more motivated to do something that they have already agreed to, but maybe they just need a little help, motivating themselves. So this is a project that I worked on when I was in the Victorian state government back in Australia. And this was trying to reduce the proportion of teenage children who were unvaccinated against human papillomavirus, so HPV. It's known to contribute to a higher risk of cervical cancer in later years, but you need to administer the vaccine when people are teenagers in order for them to have lifelong immunity. And we're trying to reduce the unvaccinated share in the population. So we see this on the graph. This is the unvaccinated share. And what we found is that many schools, they would run vaccination programs, and parents would return consent forms agreeing that, yes, they wanted their child to be vaccinated, but those children would just not turn up at the clinic. The clinic was often held earlier in the day, and so the parents needed to know that they actually had to get their child to the school right on time, or they'd miss the clinic. And so what we experimented with was a series of SMS reminders to try and motivate the parents to make sure their children receive the vaccination that they've already agreed they should receive. And so what we found is that sending a SMS that said human papillomavirus is still a risk in your community, it reduced the unvaccinated share by about 3 percentage points. And then also sending an SMS that didn't say it was still a risk, so we weren't tapping into that fear-based message, but it was more, make sure you have a plan for how your child will get to school on time for the clinic. It's changing the schedule, so you may need to change things in the morning, but we're just reminding them that this is something that's happening, and so you need to make a plan for how you're going to do it. And we found that both messages were about equally effective, although I will say that the planning prompt actually got a number of complaints from parents who said, what do you mean make a plan for getting my child to school? I get them to school every day. Thank you very much. We spoke to some principals and they said, well, actually, those parents don't. And that's why they're complaining. It was a very emotionally raw subject that you broached them. Whereas the HPV is still a risk message, we found it was almost as motivating, but it didn't get a single complaint. No complaints at all. And so the government decided to scale the risk SMS because it was the most acceptable to the community in this case. And so by sending this SMS, we managed to actually close the unvaccinated gap within this particular population. So it was a very good result. So we've taken you through the attention grabbing, we've taken you through the beliefs, we've taken you through the context that a choice is made, and now the determination. And so we'd like to just hop back over to the Woo Clap, and we'd like to ask you, what of those elements, the A, the B, the C, or the D, are you seeing more in your own work? Are you seeing problems around attention, problems around beliefs, the choice and the context and the conformity, or is it more around determination? We'd like to see what barriers you're seeing in your own work. So the link from before should still be working, but if you've lost it, you can scan the slide again and it will take you to the Woo Clap. So I'm seeing so far we're having a fairly even distribution, although I'm shocked and surprised that determination is so low at the moment. For me, like in my personal life, determination is the lowest, factor. Kiara's always trying to motivate me to do things, but maybe you're dealing with very different policy challenges than we are. Let's do another refresh. Okay, beliefs, how interesting. I'd be very interested maybe after the seminar we can hear more about what are these beliefs that are getting in people's way or acting as blockers to doing the behavior that we're interested in. Or perhaps you were all just so impressed by this this beliefs case study of reducing car fatalities by painting the roads. And you thought, I would love to do that in my own work as well. Great. Well, I'm not really seeing any more questions come in, so we're going to jump back to the slides and hand over to my colleague Eva, who will take us through the remainder of our session. Over to you, Eva.
Thanks, Cam, and thanks, everyone. It's great to be here with you all. We've just heard some great examples of nudging from Cam, and now I'm going to talk to you about sludge. So what is sludge? Sludge is basically anything that gets in the way of a good user experience. It's a play on the word nudge. So nudge is what behavioural insights teams are associated with doing. We make improvements to the decision environment to make it easier for people and citizens to go in the direction they want to go. And sludge is those countervailing forces that are holding people back. So it can be all the things that we know of when it comes to difficult customer experience, confusing websites, complicated forms, excessive waiting time. In BI, we have traditionally focused on nudging, and sludge has presented us with a new set of opportunities to apply behavioural science in service improvement. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about that today. So on the next slide, what is a sludge audit? So a sludge audit is how we uncover and address the hidden sludge in a service or process. It's a structured behavioural assessment that helps us identify the psychological and procedural barriers in a service or process. And sludge audits do essentially three things. They diagnose the problem, they propose behavioural solutions, and they measure impact. And best of all, sludge audits support existing tools. So for many of you who might already be working in service improvement, and for people that are actually doing sludge audits out in the real world, a lot of them are people that are already in service improvement roles who are using sludge audits to complement the work they're already doing. So it's a way for you to channel the insights that you're already getting and be able to apply a behavioural lens to the data that you collect and to the way that you analyse it and to the solution building. On the next slide, we have a little bit more detail around the sludge audit steps. The most widely adopted sludge audit method comes from New South Wales, Australia. It breaks down the sludge audit into 7 steps, starting with mapping the user journey and ending with designing solutions. And the process involves estimating time, scoring ease, measuring psychological costs, and looking at inclusion barriers as well. But it's not just about finding the friction, it's also about equipping teams with prompts and tools to improve service delivery, and that's where we bring in the solution building. And it also includes a follow-up audit so that you can measure the change. On the next slide, we have an example of what we call a sludge scale. So to make the assessment of sludge as consistent and objective as possible, the sludge audit incorporates these behavioural scales, which define what good looks like for any different type of service interaction. So there's literally thousands of these scales. And this is an example of one for assessing a letter that's sent to people, to citizens. And it's really just looking at one component of the letter. So this is the opening part of the letter. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just to show you that it has criteria, and the criteria in it come from what we've tested to work in behavioural science as being an impactful piece of correspondence, so something that people are more likely to read, more likely to act on, more likely to achieve the things that we want the correspondence to do. And then we've codified that into these scales. So it's just one of the ways that we incorporate behavioural science into the sludge audit process. On the next slides, we show how behavioural science works with existing kind of insights that we might be collecting about the citizen journey. So there are a lot of different inputs that we use for a sludge audit. We draw from user and staff insights, which are really important. In fact, I was just reflecting as Cam was talking about his example of the New South Wales fine trial, where they changed the name. The original name of the fine was called an enforcement order. And when we were doing the user research and actually talking to people and finding out, and we actually spoke to staff that are receiving the calls from people who have inquiries about these fines, we said, oh, what are people calling you about? And they said, oh, well, most people are calling to find out what an enforcement order is. And then we said, oh, what do you say to them? And they said, oh, we say it's an unpaid fine. So you saw the version that Cam showed you, the behavioural informed version had the title unpaid fine. So hopefully that stopped a lot of calls after that as well. So insights are really important and critical and amazing things. And as we all know, people working in service improvement, how critical that is, and how a lot of unexpected insights can come from actually just talking to the users and talking to the people who work in the service. But it's equally important that we combine that with behavioural data. So, and that's really important in terms of understanding not just what people say, but what they actually do. So looking at things like how much time people are spending, looking at behavioural outcomes, and assessing against best practice. So using things like the sludge scales to give us a sense of how our process compares to what it should look like. On the next slide, we have an example of a sludge audit. So this is an example from New South Wales, and the issue that they were trying to address was, in New South Wales, children have access to these medical checks that they get at key development milestones in their early life, but they're underutilised. So there's 8 checks, And 90% will show up to the first one. So very high take up of the first check, but it really peters off. So by the time you even get to the fourth check, only 10% of people are actually taking up the check. So the aim of the Sludge audit was to understand, well, what's stopping parents or carers from continuing, and what can we do to improve it using behavioural science? On the next slide, we have the journey map. The journey map lays out some of the barriers and shows that actually making an appointment and attending the appointment actually takes 38 steps. So, you know, you might think on appointment, how hard could that be? But actually there's quite a lot involved in actually getting to your appointment. And that means quite a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong. So even just mapping the journey tells us a lot about where the challenges might be. And on the next slide, we show just some of the issues that we found. One is that even just going online to book an appointment takes like 45 minutes. So even just finding the information to get to actually book the appointment takes a long time. Also contacting the clinic took multiple attempts. This is something that the service owners didn't realise. And some people were waiting up to an hour. A lot of people were giving up, calling back and waiting for the clinic to confirm. And that they were spending like 9 days waiting for the clinic to come back, for them to call back, and then for the appointment to actually be locked in. So you can see that's quite a lot of sludge when all you're trying to do is just book an appointment. And then on the next slide, in addition to that, there were just some very, kind of common behavioural issues that we see in terms of awareness, people forgetting. That's why reminders are really important. And also that problem you have is once you miss the first couple, a lot of that behaviourally, that tends to be a big barrier for us, and it tends to be less likely that we'll pick up again once we've missed a few. So we really want to try and make sure that once we have that momentum at the start, that we've got ways to actually keep that momentum going. So in terms of some of the solutions that we put in place, on the next slide, we have a few of these. One of the things was about really making these development checks really salient at the very beginning, so at the point at which the baby's born. So how we do that in the blue book that's used, that parents get when they have a baby. Then at the first check, because we know we're getting a lot of take up of the first check, which is great. But really, how do we really leverage that moment? And so looking at how we can train nurses to really deliver a more behaviourally informed way of talking about the checks and making people aware of the importance of them, and also proactively booking the next appointment at that first check. Also giving parents a magnet, so something they can put on their fridge, very easy, something they can keep up for many years, and it has that gold gradient effect. So you can see the first box ticked of the first appointment you went to, and then you can see the progress and what you need to do next. So there's a real kind of motivation to want to tick the rest of those boxes. Also, we made some improvement to the website to make it easier to find where you need to book, and also, of course, sending reminders, so sending text message reminders. And on the next slide, we have some of the results. So the health department that was doing this set a target of increasing the checks by 10%, but actually with just some of these pretty low-cost nudges, we saw that we increased the attendance and subsequent checks by 24%, and this was just in that initial period. So really, yeah, great success, and really important to show how important it is to actually be doing the sludge, doing the auditing to find out where the problems are, so that you can make sure that the solutions are really focused on where they need to go. On the next slide, we have a little bit about, I guess, some of the feedback we've received from service owners, people that are doing sludge audits in the field, in terms of what they have found to be the value of those. And these are some of the things that, I guess, to summarise. One is that they really like that it applies a behavioural lens. So for a lot of people that might have a background in behavioural science, learning about how they can draw on behavioural science to understand services and where they can and how they can be improved using behavioural science is something that people really like. Also, being able to have ready access to all that evidence, like those examples that Cam's talking about. How do we consolidate that and make it accessible? And that's one way that we do it through the sludge audit. Secondly, that it provides objectivity. So people really like the fact that you have these structured prompts that you ask of each point in the process. And a lot of the time that's uncovered a lot of sludge, again, that people weren't expecting. So sometimes when we do more exploratory research, which is also important, but exploratory research can leave out things because of our own biases, because people aren't going to be able to tell you everything you need to know. You need to ask them the questions. So those behavioural prompts have been really powerful in terms of being able to get richer data. Also about quantifying the friction. So people really love that they get numbers at the end of an audit and it shows where the problems are quantified according to a number of different metrics. So that's something that people really like. And that kind of leads to the last point about measuring impact, because when you do have these numbers, it makes it easier to be able to then track impact over time. And so people really like that they can do a re-audit and then have these standardized metrics that they can keep comparing against to see what impact their changes have had. So we're going to do a quick poll now. So you should have that link to the WooClap, but if you don't, you can just click, use that QR code again. Curious to know, of those 4 benefits of a sludge audit, which would be most useful in your context right now? So we've got the bringing a behavioural lens, using the objective criteria, quantifying the friction, tracking real improvements. If you were looking at the service improvement work maybe that you already do, what would be something that would help complement that work? Or if you're not doing service improvement work systematically, what would be the sort of things that would be important to you in enabling you to do that really well? All right, we've got some responses come through already, which is great. The last point about tracking real improvements, I agree, very important. That is something that I think is one of the big benefits and one of the important things that enable us to keep continuing the work that we're doing, because we can prove the impact of the work that we're doing. So that's great. All right, well, we'll jump back into the deck. I want to tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing more broadly in the OECD in sludge reduction. I think Chiara and alluded to it a bit earlier in the presentation. We hosted an international sludge academy a couple of years ago, and over 20 countries took part in that, and about 14 of those did sludge audits as part of the sludge academy. 2 of which were France and Armenia, who we're very lucky to have in the session with us today, doing amazing work in service innovation and improvement. And off the back of the Sludge Academy, we also published a paper with lessons and insights from the Academy and guidance on how things to think about when you're doing your own sludge audit, which was really, really valuable. And on the next slide, we have some of the feedback that we got from participants. It was really positive and encouraging. And we had a number of countries that actually went off to do create their own sludge audit method, or adapting the method for their context, which was really awesome. And other countries who've gone off to scale sludge audits across their administration, including Finland, which is one of the countries that I'm working with. And on the next slide, got a little bit about the international sludge audit method that we're developing. So we have a lot of countries that are continuing to approach us around doing sludge audits and wanting support to embed sludge audits in their jurisdictions. And so we are working on publishing a sludge audit method that will be guided by a number of principles, so that anybody in the world can access it and use it to do sludge audits. So some of the principles that are guiding us is we want the method to be accessible to any country, regardless of size or resources. We want it to be harmonised, so building on the great work that's already happening in terms of, I mentioned there's other sludge audit methods, not just in countries, but that academics are using around the world. And how do we bring that together? Also making it adaptable to different service types and administrative structures. We also want it to be continually evidence-based, so building on the latest evidence from world experts. We want it to be comparable, so that teams have common metrics to apply and we can then learn from each other as well. And we also really want it to be agile and open source, so it continues to evolve with the needs of the global community, and there's someone who's actually maintaining it and ensuring that as we're getting feedback, or if we want to make enhancements to the method, that they're continually being incorporated. And on the next slide, we have a bit about our sludge expert panel. So to help shape and refine this international method, we've convened this sludge expert panel, which is made up of a diverse group of global thought leaders and practitioners. And the panel is being chaired by Professor Cass Sunstein from Harvard University, who, as we know, was the first to conceptualise sludge audits. And you can see from the slide, we have a cross-disciplinary group of experts. And this is what's really giving the method its strength. We're not just building a method, but we're building a community of practice to help governments take this work forward. And the plan is to publish that paper next year. So if you're interested in learning more about sludge audits and doing or maybe being part of a sludge academy, we can bring the sludge academy to you. We have a tested model where we work closely with countries to deliver hands-on training, tailored mentoring and solution design, and how to also embed that practice in your government. And so the goal being not to just sort of do a one-off audit, but to build that sort of lasting capability so that your teams can continue to embed sludge audits alongside your service improvement work that you're already doing. And that's one of the things that we're doing at the moment in Finland. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand over to Chiara is going to close out the session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Eva, and thank you so much, Cameron, for a very engaging presentation. And thank you so much for the participants for engaging with all our polls. That was great. So if you're interested in training, you want to hear more about the International Sludge Academy that Eva is leading, or also about the BRAIN Network, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Our address is behavioural@oecd.org. And with this, I will pass the floor back to Nick to continue the presentations, and I really look forward to the discussion later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chiara, Cameron, and Eva. Really fascinating to see, I think, the amount of work that you pull off, that you have pulled off over the recent years. This is amazing. I think also for the colleagues joining online, I think this is indeed like an open invitation, as you said, Chiara, to reach out to you, to any of you, to the team, to see if there is an interest, how they can really get to all of this material, how can they also engage in person and with their institutions, their countries, because there is, I think, really a vibrant community around this. This is super. I'm just keeping an eye on the time and realizing that we are just running a little bit behind, but not worrying, so that's okay. I would, for now, colleagues, as participants, write down your questions or continue to put them in the chat. The ones that we can answer immediately in the chat, we will do, and then for the others, we will take them after the presentation. Because with this, indeed, I would like to move on to Mariam, indeed, to see how all of this is now really applied into the French public administration. So with this, Mariam, the floor is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nick. So I'm guessing you're seeing my slides.
We do, yes, we do.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting me to share our experience in France. And before that, I'd just like to, first of all, thank Chiara, Cameron, and Eva for the excellent presentation, but also highlight how amazing it is to always work with them. I've been working with the team since, I think 2018 or 19. And everything that they've shared is extremely practical. So, for example, we participated in the Sludge Academy a couple of years ago, and we tested this approach on a letter that the elderly have to send to the government to receive different allowances to have more autonomy in their homes. And what we did was a project where we simplified letters across France and tested them on a very large panel. And it really allowed us to, when you put the WooClap, Eva, it was hard to answer one of them because they were all super important. It allowed us to quantify the friction, to really objectify where the problems were, to simplify the letters, and then have better versions that were actually tested on real French citizens. So it was really super, super relevant, and it really engaged our team into thinking about how can we create, kind of sludge audits more frequently in France. So with this, just to share with you practically what we do, some of the work we do is around simplification and it's close to sludge, but a lot of it is also on other more complex topics. Not to say that simplification isn't complex, it's really super complicated to simplify, but just to show you that there's other topics such as like domestic violence or complex topics that I'm going to present in my slides. So first of all, to give you an idea of where we sit and who we are. I sit within a structure called DITP. So as you see here above, Direction Interministérielle de la Transformation Publique, which is an interministerial directorate, sitting in the Ministry of simplification and public transformation. Broadly, DTP has different missions. One of them is implementing the government's priority policies, coordinating administrative efforts to simplify any procedures, forms, or enhancing user service quality for citizens. We also have work on innovation, organizational transformation, and this is more related to the work that I do. And we also have funds to accelerate high impact projects across administration. So we have a very interministerial positioning, and this allows us to work on very different policies, which, as you will see, range from environment to health to labor to really any topic that is, any type of policy. Within the DTP, you have an innovation team, and this innovation team has different competencies, which I'll share in a second. And part of that innovation team is our team, the behavioral science team, which is a rather small team that works with the other teams within innovation. So we have service design in the innovation team. We have a team that works on co-construction with civil society, and another team that works on collaborative strategies and management practices. And so depending on the project, we are sometimes brought to collaborate with the other teams. So a lot of our projects, as you will see, are quite interdisciplinary. What I'll do in this focus on behavioral insights is show you two things. First of all, very practically, how we launched the team, how we went from scratch into creating a team and projects and got fundings. And then I will show you examples of projects that we work on. So I'll show you the typology of projects we do, and I'll take you through three examples very quickly, and I'll focus on one of them in detail so that you can get a sense of how we basically run our projects. So the story of our team started around 2014. I personally joined the team in 2016, but in 2014, there was one initial project which was done with an external consultancy. It wasn't an internalized team yet. There was one person, Stéphane Giraud, working on user experience in a sense. And he worked with external consultants on a project to encourage French taxpayers to pay their taxes online rather than paying them, by check or filing them through paper. And so this is a long time ago. People were not yet used to online payment. There were a lot of frictions, and a nudge approach to a certain extent, or a letter approach, was tested to kind of convince people to pay online. And this project was one initial proof of concept, which had very good return on investment, which showed that with a simple letter, they were able to really have impact and convert to online payments. And so this opened the opportunity to have more capacity. I mean, more was basically just one person, which was me, who joined in 2016. But it still opened the floor to say, okay, maybe we should test this behavioral insights approach and think of how it can grow within DTP. So I joined Stéphane, and then in 2018 we were 2 members, and we found within the French government a funding, an innovation funding called Programme d'Investissement d'Avenir, that allowed us to fund an initial set of 10 projects. And this model is super interesting because if you're able to secure a funding, even if it's to test 1, 2, 3, or up to 10 projects, it allows you to build a case and to have a proof of concept to say, okay, so we use an initial funding, we did a project, and the choice of these projects is super important because these projects will allow you to show return on investment. And then if it's convincing, then you can build on the next steps of building your team. So if you're thinking about kind of creating capacity or building a team, I would advise you to, kind of secure funding, do 1 or 2 very high impact projects, and then build from there. So what we did after we got this funding is we launched a call for projects to all French administrations, and we got a lot of response and a lot of a high need. And within those projects that we got, we selected the ones that had high impact on policy and government priority. We made sure that the problems we were addressing were behavioral problems. meaning that we're not talking about something that's completely structural or legal on which we don't have any lever. We also tried to make sure that data was available for us to be able to measure before and after our intervention, because this element was super important for us to showcase return on investment. We also had ethical criteria because, as you know, this topic of behavioral change comes with a lot of ethical consideration, something which we worked on with the OECD and created a report with ethical standards for all the BI community. And we also were trying to make sure that administrations were engaged in the project till the end. It wasn't that they were coming with projects for us to work on and submit, but really they were on board with us and engaged so that they can also get more familiar with this approach. So the funding we secured, the call for projects helped us identify projects. And then in parallel, we did a bid to identify consultancies and external partners, academic partners, that could help us, because we were only 2 members and there was no way we could run 10 projects with only 2 people. So this allowed us to identify consultancies that worked with us for the 4 years after this launch. And it allowed us to really have a showcase of 10 very rigorous, clean projects that were now kind of our showcase to say, okay, look, this is what we did. This is the impact we got. If it's convincing, then maybe we can secure new funding to recruit more people and new projects. And so luckily it was the case. And I think this is because we really tried to select the projects in a very informed manner. It took us a lot of time to pick which projects we would start with, because some projects are difficult to handle in the beginning. They might not show results immediately. They might not be super tangible. So I think the initial set of projects is super important to think about. Then in 2021, when we were able to convince that there is added value of behavioral insights, we secured a new funding for 30 additional projects. So as you can see, it's like a step-by-step process. And this allowed us to hire 5 team members and 3 interns. And so basically, we were trying as much as we could to say, okay, we were relying on external consultancies, external researchers, but maybe we can now start to transition into working on the projects internally without the need to, kind of work with consultancies, even though it was a necessary first step because we didn't have the capacity at first. And so since then, we've been working on these projects. All of them are published on our websites. I'll give you the link. So in total, now we have around 60 projects that we've run, a lot of them internally and some externally. And so today in 2025, I would say that 90% of our projects are totally internalized. And we did open a new bid with consultancies so that administrations that have topics that are not necessarily high priority, that we cannot take on, are worked with consultancies without our assistance. And so we moved a little bit from this very nudge approach, as did the whole community of behavioral insights, into something a bit more large that takes into account more systemic factors. And we are walking more and more towards evidence-based policymaking, the importance of taking account evaluation, etc. when you work on projects. So we can go back to this if you have questions on how to run a team, how to launch projects, what criteria to use for selecting projects. These are all questions I think that teams ask themselves when they're starting out in this field. So just to give you now a clearer sense of what kind of things we do. The typology of projects we work on is very broad. Some of our projects, and this is the ideal case that you see here on number 2, is when we do research to inform a policy before the policy is formulated, because this means that we can take time to really think about how, when this policy will be rolled out, how it will take into account behavior beforehand. It's not a corrective approach. It's really from the beginning, think about it behaviorally. So it's a behavioral policy by design. And this is the best case scenario when we have time, because it allows us to test scenarios, to roll out and really have something efficient from the beginning. And it also allows us, if what you see on number 7, to come back to it later and to maybe monitor 3 years later or a couple of years into implementation, whether it worked or not. So when this happens, we're very happy. But this doesn't happen all the time. Most of the time, what happens is we get things like number 3. So we are addressed by administrations to work on simplification of forms, things that are closer to sludge audits, because this is something that's extremely important, how to make the interaction between citizens and public administration and public services easier, more seamless, etc. And we also have a lot of work that falls under number 5, meaning understanding why a policy failed. So administrations would come to us with something that they've put into place for which there was no uptake, or for which there were things that didn't work. And then they'd be like, okay, can you use the behavioral science approach to tell us why it didn't work, run a diagnosis of what are the frictions, etc. I would say that, 70% of the projects that we get fall upon this number 5 policy adoption part, but we are pushing to number 2 and number 7 as much as we can. Now, just to show you as I said, we're interministerial, which is very interesting for us, because we get to work on very different policy areas: environment, health, etc., economy. And so, of course, given that we're not experts of all these topics, sometimes we are also brought to work with researchers who are experts in these topics, or the administration that comes to us brings on experts. So we create teams that have our behavioral lens, but also experts that are specifically knowledgeable about the topic we're working on. When I finish this presentation, I can come back to this slide, and if there's any specific project you're interested in, we can go back to it. But all of these projects are published on our website, so if you're interested, you can find their full reports, and they're all translatable now using AI in a couple of seconds, I guess. Okay, so I will not go into these 2 slides, because Cameron and Chiara already gave you an idea of how a project rolls out. I'll just go over it quickly, just to say that when we get a project, we first analyze the problem. We spend, I would say, 2-3 months really mapping where the problem is, creating user journeys, mapping frictions, doing interviews, doing a lot of field work. A lot of our work really consists in going on the field, talking to participants, going to, for example, we worked on a project where we had to go to shops and see how people are buying products. There's a project we did on why shops don't turn off their lights at night. We actually walked at midnight to see which shops have their lights on. So a lot of our work is really, really field work. So and it's my favorite part. So even if it's at midnight in weird places in France, it allows us to really get a sense of what the problems are. And of course, we rely a lot on scientific literature, on examining the data available, etc. Then our solutions, when we design solutions, this part is very interdisciplinary. We work with the design team at DTP. We also work with other graphists, for example, and we make sure that our solutions are not are the most adapted to the current context. So here's something a mistake that we did in the beginning when we started working in BI is we were trying to find really inventive, out-of-the-box solutions that were like, kind of witty, that no one thought of. But with experience, we saw that actually sometimes very small changes that fit completely in the settings of the administration, that are pragmatic, realistic, that don't require like changes of the whole system, but really just make something that already exists a bit better, have much higher chances of working and have much higher chances of being scaled. So now we have a very pragmatic approach in this solution part, and you'll see that sometimes in examples that I'll give or in reports that we shared, that sometimes it's very small things and they make a huge difference. And then the trial and testing, also it's something we changed a bit our minds about in the 10 past years, I would say. So at first we were very much strict about doing the most rigorous testing possible, randomized control trials, especially when we had this phase of like these 10 projects. We wanted to make sure they were irreproachable projects, like the best projects you could ever find, that would like statistically significant results, randomized control trials, etc. And the reason for that is we had to have convincing first 10 projects. But now, as we go, we realize that sometimes, even if we can't run extremely complex randomized control trials that are extremely clean, taking administrations on small steps towards experimentation, towards testing, is already better than nothing. So we also kind of came back on that strictness, and now we, even if we do small trials or small monitoring of data, or just putting into place a system that collects data for us, is already good enough. And so we can come back to that later. And so then we try to scale our solutions from the solutions that we've worked on, the 60. A big part of them was scaled on all of France, but a lot of them also were not scaled because the results were either not significant, and that's a finding in itself, or because the context was not the same in other parts of France, and we can go back to that in the questions as well. Just looking at time, because I have the tendency to to talk more than I should on certain things, but I'm passionate about this topic, that's why. So just to show you concrete examples of projects. So this is one of the earliest projects that we ran when we first started, and it's the simplest in the sense that it looks like those the work that was shown also by Cameron, where you can change in letters, you can change certain information, and that can have a big impact in itself. And so this project was done with, so I never find the word in English for auto-entrepreneur, so people who have their own small companies. It can be a one-person company, a two-person company, but keep in mind that it's very small companies. And so these companies have to, if we can call them companies, have to file their social taxes online. So it's something that's mandatory in France. Since 2019, if you don't file your taxes online, you get fined. You cannot pay by check. You cannot go to pay by cash. You just have to file it online. And this is in the non-compliance examples that came to us, where the administration told us, even though this obligation is there, even though people get a fine if they don't do it, we see that 20% of auto-entrepreneurs still pay their social taxes by money or by check. So is there any way to approach this problem? What we worked on here is a simple letter. So the letter that you see, you can't see the details, but just the structure. We created something very clear in which we stated the objective, reminded people the objective to the advantage, of online payment. We had a call to action with step-by-step clear things to say, here's what you have to do. We're taking you through the website step by step. Here are the options. You can call for help. You can call on the phone. You can chat. You can come to the offices of this administration. And what we changed in these letters were three, right below the place where it's written clear objective in green. There's a sentence, and this sentence, we had three different versions of this sentence in 3 sets of letters that we sent to a total of 15,000 auto-entrepreneurs. And what we did is either tested a social norm, reminding auto-entrepreneurs that more than 80% of people like you in your region pay their social taxes online. We used a version where we had a reminder of the law and their obligation to pay online. We reminded them of the fine and the fact that non-compliance is a problem. And a third version where we tested a planification aid to help them planify their online payment, because what we observed when we did the fieldwork is that many of them waited for the last second to pay their social taxes. I think this is a behavior of all of us here. And what happened is when everyone logged in at the last minute, they were lost, they were stressed, the website crashed, so they were like, okay, I'm just going to pay by check. It's easier. Plus, it gives me more time because by the time the check is processed, etc., it buys me more time. And so what we did is we tested these letters with the control letter, which was usually sent as a reminder for people to pay their taxes online, to 15,000 people. And what we see is that all our letters are significantly better than the control letter, meaning that they increased the online payment of taxes. We had the prediction, we made the hypothesis that number one, the social norms one, would work best based on scientific literature that we had read before, or other trials. But what we saw is that the reminder of the law increased online payment by 60%, which is huge when you think of the intervention, which is just a change in wording. So return on investment here is extremely good in this project, and this was one of the projects that we showcased along the 9 others that I told you about. Let me give you 2 other examples, and I'll detail one of them a bit more if I have time. One of them was one other project we did with the Ministry of Environment in 2019 was encouraging the repair of electronic goods. And this means that when people buy products, electronics, computers, TVs, any type of electronic good, what we wanted to promote was repair rather than replacement. So that's like when your computer or your phone doesn't work, you can take it and repair it. And so we created a repairability index, which is a score that goes from 1 to 10 with the color indicator that gives you a quick indication of how repairable the product is. So what we want is to drive people to buy products that have green labels, 7.5 to 10. So the method here was, first of all, with the design team, design 10 different sets of different repairability indexes and test them on a small sample of 2,000 people in a lab to see which ones of these 10 are the most noticed by consumers when they are looking at products, the most understood, the most taken into account. Once we tested it on a small scale, we then worked with the retailers, with a company in France that sells electronic products, and we tested a real-life experiment on their website. This website is called Darty, and we tested in a randomized control trial the different versions of the 3 labels, the 3 indexes that were kept from the initial set of 10. So when consumers went on Darty to buy, for example, a computer, they had one of these 3 versions against a control which was nothing, basically no information. And so what we tested here on a couple of months, the behavior of 140,000 consumers to see which one of these 3 labels is the one that's really changing people's buying behavior. Are they taking it into account? Is it changing their behavior, or are they like not taking into account the repairability? And what we found here is that the one that you see, the third one, which is also the labels that you see on the above right section of my slide, are the ones that people were taking into account in their buying behavior, and the ones that were changing people's behavior. So when the label was low, they would not buy the product. When the label was high, they would purchase the product. So this was super interesting, and it was scaled on a national level on all products in France. So now if you go anywhere in France, you'll find these indexes on any electronic good. And what we wanted to know 4 years later is, okay, so now we've implemented this, perfect. It looks nice on paper, but does it really work? Does it work? So here we did a very large quasi-experimental evaluation, taking 20 million entries of people's buying behavior over the past 4 years to see, did it change anything? Did it change people's behavior, or have people bought more repairable goods than not? So what we found here is, if we take into account everything, so in-shop and online behavior, there is a trend. So there's a positive but not statistically significant impact of the index on sales of more repairable products compared to less repairable ones. But if you take into account only online buying, so not in shop, only online, here we see a very interesting effect. So we see a statistically positive effect of the index on the sales because it's much more controlled. When you have it online, people see it, the size is big, it's near the price because it's regulated so that it's near the price. While in shops, people are having behaviors that are a bit different. Sometimes we saw when we went to do field work that people were hiding the index behind the TV or making it super small, or sometimes they're not printing it. So this shows that, yeah, when behavior of shop owners intervenes, it kind of like blurs the results. But we see a super interesting finding online where the index works. Not only does it work on citizens and consumers, but it also works on retailers. So we see that also retailers are changing what they put on the market. And you see here on the graph on the right that there is a big peak of greens. This means that when the the label becomes green, you have much more products that are green, that are dark green, than products that are yellow, red. You don't even have red. So it's really like this green and red lights are actually it's a super powerful signal that that is working on both targets that we targeted in our study. And so just to finish the story on repairability index, in France, this thought evolved into putting something that's called the index de durabilité, which is a sustainability index, which is going to replace the repairability index. And Europe, at European level, there's also thoughts on how to create this durability index across all of Europe. And this study has actually been taken into account for designing this new sustainability index. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going a bit fast because I still have 15 minutes, which maybe leaves me the time to get into the details of the last study. So this last study, which I'm going to take you through in a little bit more detail so that you see very concretely like how we do our steps, was encouraging physicians to screen domestic abuse. So what's the context of the study? In 2020, there's a health authority in France called Haute Autorité de Santé that published a recommendation that tells doctors to systematically ask all women patients about possible experiences of violence in their homes. When I say recommendation, it's not exactly a recommendation because it's a good practice that should be implemented by doctors. So doctors have to do it. When the health authority in France comes out with documents like this, they expect doctors to comply and to actually do this practice. But what we saw in our surveys and different other surveys that were run in 2019 and in focus groups that we ran was that doctors had not all doctors had heard about recommendations. Only 60% had heard about it. Only 12% had read it. And among those who had read it, they all forget that it's systematic, which means that every single woman patient you receive, you have to ask this question because this increases the chances of detecting domestic violence. So there's a big action intention gap here, as Cameron was pointing earlier. So some of them say we have the intention of applying it, but in practice, very little people actually apply this recommendation. So when we did our field work, meaning that we went and interviewed doctors, we went to different doctors' offices, we spoke to NGOs that work with victims of domestic violence, etc. We saw that one of the problem was first information overload. Doctors, this is one recommendation or practical guideline among many that the health authority sends out. Doctors don't have time to consult these recommendations. Even their consultation times are super short, so they just don't have the time to keep and update the practices that they have to apply. And also, they don't apply the recommendations because they have their own usual habits of how they proceed in their cabinets. So, and also this recommendation is a bit complicated to implement because it means that you have to ask a very sensitive question to patients that sometimes you know from before. And so suddenly asking this question is a little bit odd and they just don't know how to handle it. So to objectify the real barriers, we went and did different types of activities. First of all, a scientific lit review. We went and reviewed the academic literature and the gray literature, meaning the non-scientific, but just documents that were published on this topic, not only in France, but really also in other countries. We also did a documentary review of the work that's carried out by the HIS. We looked at everything they send doctors. Where do they put their information? Is it only on the website on HIS? And do they expect doctors to come to HIS, or is it sent proactively to people who say that they have no time? In our qualitative research, we did observations in general practitioners' offices, in health centers. We did a lot of semi-structured qualitative interviews, trying to understand, like, why are you not asking this question? What are the difficulties, etc.? And we did co-creation workshops with GPs. So this is super important when designing our solutions. Every single time we co-create, because if we're designing something in our office and expect other people to apply it, it can seem completely disconnected from their reality. So co-creating with them and the solutions being what they think can really fit within their own setting, etc., is a lot more convincing. And then we created a behavioral model, which I'll show you in a bit, to categorize the main barriers for this topic. So the behavioral model that we used is one that is very used in behavioral science. It's called the COM-B model, which I think some of you know. It says that, okay, to be able to have a behavior, to see a behavior happen, people have to have the capacity. This is the C of COM-B. They have to have the opportunity, and they have to have the motivation. And only if you have capacity and opportunity, then you create the motivation for the behavior to happen. And what's interesting about the COM-B model compared to other models is that it takes into account the structural limitations, not only the behavior. It's not only the problem of people's beliefs, people's choices, people's attention, it's also what are the structural barriers. And very often, the problems in policies are structural. And one of the things that evolved a lot in behavioral science since 2010 is with this nudge approach and the cognitive bias approach, is that we started really going into much more systemic approaches where we say, okay, it was super interesting to take things from the behavioral, from the cognitive bias starting point, but that means that we're really over responsibilizing individuals and their biases or their defectuous thinking, and not taking into account the structural problems, which are much bigger, and also the biases of policymakers, which I'll come back to later. So what we did here is we said, okay, so in terms of capacity, do general practitioners have the necessary knowledge and skills to question all women? And this is how we incorporated questions on capacity in our interview questionnaires. We saw that a large number of doctors are either unaware of the recommendation or don't remember it. Sometimes doctors underestimate the prevalence of domestic violence, and they're not fully aware of the range of violence within their patients. A lot of them have not been trained or don't know how to ask this question. It's not an easy question to ask. You can directly break the trust with the patient if you ask it in an odd way or in a non-professional way. Also, in terms of motivation, are general practitioners motivated to systematically question women? And here we saw that some doctors believe that it's not their role. It's not their role is a doctor, and the role on domestic violence is maybe social workers or other types of professionals. Some doctors also said that they were afraid of damaging their relationship with their patients, and they also thought, and this is super important because we see this across many policies, some doctors think they will not be able to change the situation of women even if they detect violence. And this self-efficacy, or believing that anyway, even if you do something, it won't change anything, this is a huge barrier to action. And then we also saw a problem of opportunity, meaning in the physical environment, doctors say that they don't have time, they don't have the tools, and so structural barriers are super important also to take into account. So we in this project, we proposed different sets of solutions, again, co-constructed with the GPs. So for example, introducing an additional step in the medical history taking, because in France, there's an online app where you can take the medical history of the person. Do you smoke? Do you drink, etc.? So we thought maybe adding an additional step can remind the doctor to ask the question. Also, maybe asking the patients to fill out a small, very short 5 questions questionnaire during the consultation, so that this question is brought in a very natural, subtle way, and it's not the doctor who has to ask it in a odd manner. We also thought about training and support to improve doctors' awareness of the problem, train them on how to ask the problem. And we also thought about financial incentives. So for example, if you're consulting a patient and then the answer is, yes, I am a victim of domestic violence, then you can program another meeting with another consultation with this patient, and you get paid and compensated for this extra consultation. So what we selected as solutions, not we, but the actual health authority and the doctors themselves selected the solutions, were these 2. I'm going to try to wrap up in 6 minutes. One of them was a very simple one-pager that summarizes all the recommendation of the HAS, so that it's clear and it's convincing. I'll go into it to show you that it's not just a simple summary. It's a summary that addresses all the barriers that we identified in our explore phase. So it's a convincing summary of why you should do it, what are the stats, why it's important, what you can do in case of domestic violence. And we also designed a questionnaire. It's a foldable questionnaire. I'll just show you here and go back to my slides. It's a foldable questionnaire that women can take in the waiting room or inside the office of the doctor. It contains 6 questions, very short, that go from: do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you do physical activity? Are there tensions in your house? So it's not like, are you a victim of domestic violence, but are there tensions in your house? It brings the question subtly, and it breaks the ice for the doctor to be able to ask the question. And it has the numéro d'urgence, numbers that you can call in case you need any type of assistance. And to go back to the one-pager, the one-pager contains the summary of the essential information, but it also has an emphasis on the systematic nature of identification, a reminder of statistics and scientific references that doctors were very sensitive to, because they underestimate, as I said, the number of patients that are victims of domestic violence, while usually on each 10 patients that they see, 3 to 4 patients could be victims of domestic violence, which is huge. We also had a section in the bottom line of the pager, which had practical and actionable advice of what to do in case of violence, what numbers to contact, who to contact, and we outlined all the support to be offered. And we sent these letters proactively to doctors. We didn't expect doctors to go and find them on the HIS website. We sent them to GPs so that they can have it and print it. We even thought at the beginning to send it by paper, but it was too costly. So we just emailed it and they had to print it. And in the trial, what we did is a randomized control trial where we sent to 1,153 general practitioners an invitation to participate in our study. The control group didn't receive anything until the end of the study, but they were aware of the experiment. And the intervention group received the two solutions, so the one-pager and the questionnaire. They received it, and they accepted to engage in a study where we told them we would come back to them with a survey at the end to see what their behavior, how their behavior evolved. Very quickly, I'll go into the results. So this is unlike the other types of studies that I showed you, where we are monitoring behavior. We're actually seeing the behavior of people. It's very objective. It's very tangible. Here, what we are doing is a survey. So we're asking doctors what they did. So we need to correct for biases in their answers, which they might have over-reported some of the things, because it's too spectacular to be true. What we saw is that there is a 76% increase of screening, meaning that doctors are asking this question systematically to patients when they receive the solutions, which is too good to be true. If you correct for biases in reporting, you might bring it down to, even if you bring it down to 40 or 30, it's actually huge for something as simple as sending out a simplified version of a recommendation. So these were the results of this study, and then it was scaled on a national level, sent out to all doctors, and following our study, a training program was run to train doctors to ask this question correctly and kind of incapacitate them more on this topic. All of our projects are published on our website, which I'll link the link to in a second. You can find very often the publication in detail if you want to replicate the study, or one-pager summaries if it's too long. And here's the website for all these publications. And thank you very much for your attention. Glad to take any questions later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mariam, for this wonderful presentation. Just for your attention, Mariam, there are some, I would say, technical, specific questions that have been posted, that have been put in the chat. Maybe no need to take them afterwards in full, because they're quite specific and detailed, I would say. If you wouldn't mind having a quick peek in the chat and maybe dropping some quick answers to the colleagues, I think that might be super helpful. I also see some more general questions popping up, so I think that's good for our discussion afterwards. But with any further ado, I would immediately pass on to Harmik, and then we can take the questions and have a nice discussion afterwards. So please, Harmik, I think the road was paved very nicely for you with setting out the scene and the concepts, also going into the sludge audits. And I think this is also what you have been specifically working on in Armenia. But happy to hear from your practical experience and insights. So the floor is all yours, my dear Harnik.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to Mariam for the really interesting presentation, and to Chara and Cameron, Eva. Everything that you said is really quite relevant to what we've been doing in Armenia as well. So without further ado, I will quickly share my screen and present to you the case study of applying the sludge methodology in the Armenian context. So very briefly, before I start, I want to give some background into why the Information Systems Agency of Armenia is involved in sludge audits specifically. So we have a vision to build a trust-based e-society and e-economy. And all of this vision is driven by one fundamental kind of philosophy, which is realizing the concepts of the digital architecture of Armenia. Now, I won't go too detailed into this because it's not the focus of today. But what I need to stress here is that for digital transformation and transformation overall, we've adopted a kind of a decentralized approach, which means that rather than doing our digital transformation activities from the center, let's say creating a large technical team that can go through each service and digitize it, which may be fast and efficient in the shorter term, but in the medium to longer term, what we want to achieve is common standards, tools, and methodologies for all public sector agencies to be able to do this themselves, because we believe that by doing it themselves, you build these institutional capacities that then, from a policy delivery and service delivery perspective in the long run, lead to more stable foundations. So the digital architecture provides these standards, tools, and methodologies, and the Information Systems Agency of Armenia, which I represent, is responsible for providing those methodologies and standards in areas such as identity, service delivery, so user experience standards, integrations like interoperability, and infrastructure standards such as cloud and so on. There are legal acts that are being created to underpin all this as well. But one of the kind of specifics of our model, which we've adopted, so the agency itself is modeled on the RIA Information Systems Agency, if anyone is familiar with it. But we slightly diverge from the RIA concept in one area, which is that we are also responsible for coordinating the public administration reform activities from a service delivery perspective in Armenia. And the public service delivery reform component of the public administration reform strategy calls for the adoption of user-centric design approaches and citizen-centric service delivery. I guess which service delivery strategy doesn't? Now, we decided to start approaching this rather than individual services. We realized that the scope of work was so big that we needed to kind of adopt a new approach to looking at this, because there is a lot to do. And we created the 12 life events concept, which is essentially the reform of our digital services or public services through the lens of life events. And we have 12 of these earmarked, so the most important ones, and of course there are many others, starting from having a child, getting an education, starting a business. And for those of you who are maybe not so familiar with the concept, it's a life event is a significant moment in a person's life when you either establish an obligation towards the state, or you exercise a right. So, for example, the right to drive, obligations to pay tax, etc. But in all of these cases, research has shown, and this is where the sludge, the book itself, which I would highly recommend, provides some excellent insight onto this, is that when we have these memorable moments in our life, the interaction and the quality of interaction that individuals have with state institutions has a lasting impact on how they they view the state overall and the trust that's built between citizens and government and so on. So these memorable moments in our life, let's say having a child, if you have to kind of fight through bureaucracy and red tape in order to get a birth certificate, for instance, you remember that, and that has a longer term impact on how you live and how much trust you place in your obligations as a citizen. So it has many layers above just the kind of how good was the website or how understandable was this information, which of course is all part of it, but I just wanted to highlight that. So when we were building the service delivery team at the Information Systems Agency, we adopted a kind of standard product design approach, which many countries have already done. There is nothing new here. And we were trying to look at everything from the user's perspective. And what we're saying is for each life event, whereas now, let's say if you're starting a business, the citizen may interact with a number of ministries or government service providers. Some of them may be online because each ministry is digitizing their own stuff in their own way, which is normal. Sometimes you may need to go to somewhere else because you made a mistake. You may get all of the service online, and then the last point is some kind of, some paper form that particular government service provider hasn't yet digitized. And so the entire experience becomes frustrating because you have to go back on yourself and collect all that information. So the way that we can look at digitization is that, well, let's get everyone to just digitize each of those service components. So every government agency starts to digitize, and eventually everything will be digital, and we will all be fine. The challenge with that is it's very costly and time consuming, because there is probably an opportunity for making change and transformation here, which is where the sludge concepts come in. So I will admit I'm not a behavioral scientist. In fact, those two words kind of, to be honest, are a bit scary for me in the beginning, because you assume with these kind of things that there's so much theory you need to learn that it's kind of a little bit challenging to understand in the beginning. But actually, this book, which I would really highly recommend, really provides some great insight into how you can remove barriers or frictions for citizens, specifically from a public service delivery perspective. But one simple way that I would like to share with you, which I kind of helps me remember the concept of sludge, is this is a shopping mall. So I don't know how many of you go shopping in malls nowadays, but if you try to find the exit in a shopping mall, it will probably take you, I would say, at least 10 minutes. And this is a deliberate sludge that's introduced, and some sludge, like friction, can be deliberate. Of course, the owners of the malls don't want you to get out of the mall, because then you will buy less. And the placement of exit signs in malls is a common example in my mind that I always use to kind of help me remind myself of what one of the most obvious signs of sludge is. And what we did in Armenia was we were using user-centric design methodologies, and I was approached by a lady who was in the government, the Deputy Prime Minister's office, as an advisor, and she mentioned that there was this new concept that she was looking at, and we had an international partner who was ready to help us implement it. And we got introduced to the team at New South Wales, and Chiara and Eva and a number of other colleagues. And we looked at the methodology, and what we liked about it the most was that it provided a data-driven framework for us to deal with some of these kind of more qualitative concepts that we were often dealing with stakeholders. So doing user interviews, for instance, getting insights, understanding people's emotional states or user journeys is great. But if you're speaking to someone who has a kind of more quantitative mindset, it's sometimes difficult to introduce these concepts. So the sludge methodology, when we looked at it, provided us this kind of ideal balance between the data quantitative side of it and retaining a lot of the user-centric approaches. So we decided to pilot it. We gathered a team at the agency. And we did it using the sludge audit methodology that was provided by the New South Wales team. And we collected this sludge team, which was the minister, frontline staff member, user experience researcher, lawyer, user experience designer, technology architect, and they were led by the change agent, who is essentially the coordinator or lead for this project. And we did the project on owning a car. So at the moment, car registrations and the number of cars in Armenia has grown from 100,000 about 20 years ago to now just under 1 million at the latest numbers. And all of these registrations were being done physically. Then in addition, you had applying for the associated documentation. And then on top of that, you have the day-to-day processes like driver's license and all of the administrative things associated with the car. So we did a number of audits, actually, not just registration of a car, but also how you get a driving license, how you apply for a test. But I will focus on the registration audit for today. So we visited the car registration departments, of course, customs houses, people importing cars, because a lot of cars are imported from outside directly by individuals as well. We did over 20 customer interviews. We used online analytics tools, and we followed the methodology that was provided by the sludge audit tool. And this is for example, the car registration department in Yerevan, where people go and register their cars physically. Also, it's where you go to get a driving test, etc. And the results that we mapped out in the user journey brought us to some interesting conclusions. Of course, I can't go into everything, but the actual time it took to do the transaction of registering a car once you're in the office, which I showed you, is very short. Actually, that transaction time was quite efficient, and there was very little kind of scope for improvement on that individual component. But in people's minds, when we asked them, how long did it take? What were the problems? It was actually more the things that were leading up to it. So, for example, just finding the information, people were calling friends, relatives, people who'd done it before, because there was no way to find out what you needed to do and in what order. And then we had an interesting component where getting to the actual center, of course, requires a queue or an appointment. And the way that the system was structured was designed to give you the closest appointment time to the day that you were applying. But actually, you weren't made aware of the date or the time until the system had checked. So people were registering for an appointment, but then you had no idea when it was going to be. Quite often, people were not able to go at that time, so they would then lose the appointment. It seems like a small thing, but it was one of the key frustrations of this journey. And so overall, in people's minds, it amounted to around 6 to 10 days actually to register the car, even though the actual transaction only takes 10 minutes. This is, of course, just a very high level result of what we have. But we also did the customer experience scoring for each of the elements. So the applications, the waiting, gathering information, submission. And you can see here the scores were not great. And the tool itself provides us with this information, which is very helpful. So what did we do? We presented this to the minister, or the deputy minister of Interior at the time. And we came up with a transformation roadmap for this. So it included a number of key items. So providing clearer access to information on what we need to do and when. This is obvious, but the clarity of this information means also testing it and trying out the different, like our colleagues were mentioning, how you word things, how you describe the process can have an impact on how people perceive it. So we did a lot of user testing on that part. Improving the appointment booking system to provide people with a way to actually choose when they can go to these centers. Introducing interoperability between customs and registration, so sharing data rather than requesting it twice. And then this is where the sludge methodology and our life event kind of approach merge. We decided also to take a bigger step and completely digitize the whole process. And this is one thing I want to highlight about the sludge methodology and our experience is this difference between the incremental changes and the larger reforms, and how both help each other out. I will talk a bit about that in a few moments. So what did we get in terms of results? So first of all, we have the entire process documented and explained on the National Service Gateway, which explains to you where you need to go, what to do, what step happens after which. And all of this was done kind of in the frameworks of this sludge audit, using all of the inputs that people gave during the interviews. Secondly, as I mentioned, the process for getting access to the service has changed, and now the system will let you choose the exact time and date that you want to go. Again, small changes, but make a big difference in people's satisfaction. And one thing that was also introduced here is the ability to choose, let's say, regional centers. If you are willing to travel, you can get an appointment at a closer center just by traveling a little bit. You can get a closer appointment. Again, this option was not available before and was a result of the proposals from the sludge audit results. These are the initial kind of incremental changes, and also I can't show you, but the notifications that you get when registering also specified the next step in the process, so that the chain of the service continues. And of course, aside from that, I mentioned that we had then a discussion about, okay, these incremental changes are important, but our stakeholders were kind of looking for larger reforms in terms of digitizing the entire process. And that's when we started to explore digitizing the entire process of registering a car and getting a driving license. And we have the registration process will be launched in September. And it basically takes the entire flow that we just discussed and puts it online. And the goal is that the entire process requires no physical intervention. So during the sludge audit, of course, after registering the car, you need to get hold of the document, the registration certificate. These were all physical interventions that we also needed to remove. So these documents also will now become digital documents. And building on the defaults concept that I believe Cameron mentioned earlier, we also have the kind of small nudges built into the tool that allow people to register for digital notifications and get discounts on their fines. So again, we remove the need for kind of paper forms here as well. And then once you're finished, the entire process is done instantly. And if the only case where you might need a physical intervention is if you're changing the license plate. In that case, we're also looking at direct mailing the license plate to the user. Of course, to achieve this, it also required many legal changes. A package of legal amendments was brought to the government by the minister, and including things like retaining the same license plate. In order to retain the same license plate number, you had to change the law, and that will be done also. And then it means no one has to go anyway. Now, returning back to the sludge, I want to share some insights in how we got from those small changes to the larger one, because we had many internal debates about this. Should we go straight to the big changes and skip all the other things? And those debates, I believe, might be interesting for other colleagues. So I would say here, this picture is interesting. This picture is the arrow that shows the direction to the office for the registration department. This is something that also came up, that people didn't really know where it was. Even when you get there, it's a busy area. I use this picture because it demonstrates how these small changes also provide motivation and act as a catalyst for stakeholders internally to make bigger changes. Because when you make these small improvements, of course, there's a lot of behavioral theory about satisfaction, motivation through delivering results, many things that lead us to become more motivated. The main one is when we deliver results, we get motivated to do more. And so by making the smaller changes, things like the appointment booking, these small interventions, it also builds the confidence for us to make the bigger changes that seemed impossible in the beginning. But there is also a challenge associated with this, which is that once you do make these small changes, becoming kind of complacent with an uptick in satisfaction of, let's say, 20, 30% is also good, because maybe you have something more important to move on to and you move on to it. So I would say that the challenge is to make sure that you keep going and not to lose sight of bigger goals if you get kind of incremental improvements as well. Another important point, it's said many times, is the importance of aligning leadership. And for example, the kind of high-level support that we had for this initiative, even down to kind of reviewing the screens of the service, has made a big difference into how much quicker this project has gone versus how much quicker other projects have gone. Providing the legal framework, for example, that package was submitted and is already approved, and that provides us the motivation to continue. So I guess we all know this, but I would like to reiterate it again. And the other thing is that making sure that sludge is not the only tool in your kit, because it's also important to maintain a kind of broad balance of different tools that you can apply at the right moment. And I believe other colleagues also mentioned this. For example, we still do these larger quantitative surveys. This was the one done nationally at the end of last year. We also continue to do standard kind of product discovery work where necessary, but sludge is now kind of a veritable part of our toolkit for making change. And then the last point, again, is as I mentioned in the beginning, this data-driven approach really resonates with stakeholders. The ability to kind of pull out using all the insight from the sludge tool specifically, which I would like to highlight, is very effective. It provides us with this kind of data or base of data that helps us to convince stakeholders and also ourselves when we're making changes to be sure that we're doing the right thing. And just so you know that this is not a kind of a glossy version. We are all waiting now for the introduction of the digital registration certificates, digital driving licenses, which will be provided both as part of an application and also in the kind of framework of the EU wallet. And as an interim solution, also the Apple Wallet will be used. And so that we have no way of not doing it. It was also announced officially, and from September the 1st will be introduced. I want to highlight this because it's kind of a journey from kind of looking at how we can improve owning a car through to doing sludge, going on this journey, making smaller changes, and then ending up in a situation where you do achieve the big goals. I believe without the initial stages, we wouldn't have got to this point. So I guess my conclusion here is that for everyone who's considering whether to try sludge audits out, I would absolutely recommend it. And indeed, the team is also continuing with it. It's now a major part of our toolkit. We have done it on applying for citizenship and residency permits. We use the sludge audit with another partner to analyze this process. We have also done it on improving the visa process for foreign nationals. So we had people sent to the airport to talk to incoming foreign visitors to try and improve the process there. We've done it on buying a house. We have adapted it, of course, but it's become one of the most important components of our toolkit. And with that, I think I will stop for now and look forward to the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Harmik. This is amazing to see the, I think, really practical illustration of what was presented before. So the whole sludging audit or sludge audit methodology and toolkit, really interesting to see. I will not continue myself longer. I would immediately try to pass on to the audience, to participants, to shoot some questions. So colleagues, I think you know the drill by now. So if you would like to come in, just raise your virtual hand, and then we'll try to pick this up and open your microphone. While you are doing that, let me pick up on some questions that were raised already in the chat, and I think there was, I think one interesting and general one, which is on the resistance, meaning all of you are top-notch experts, committed, convinced, dedicated, converted. But this might not be the case to all the colleagues in the whole of the public administration. So the question, I mean, how do you convince others, non-specialists of the added value? And do you run into this resistance often or sometimes? And how do you cope? How do you deal with this? So question to, well, anyone who wants to dive into this, feel free, colleagues. Please, Chiara.
Happy to jump in very quickly. This is a great question, I think, and something that we all had to face. I think very quickly there are 2 or 3 points that are important to really motivate governments to uptake and then scale up behavioral insights. The first one is really showing value for money. This is something that maybe it was not enough explicit during these last hours together, but behavioral insights is really great to show value for money, because you can show the return on investment, because we always have a precondition and then we see the impact. And so this is very convincing to senior policymakers in our experience. The second thing is connecting to what Harmik was saying recently, the use of data and impact, really showing quantitatively the impact that it has, and also starting small, not with something overcomplicated, but for example, sludge audits are a great first step. We call it a foot in the door technique because it's so easy to do them that then governments and especially senior officials can see the value quickly about doing these kind of things. And just in the last years, we tried to summarize all these different principles and lessons learned. And we published last year a toolkit that is called Logic, which is really trying to support governments first convince people in government to try, but also to mainstream behavioral science in a more deliberate way, so it is not only one-off project or pilot, but it gets scaled in governments.
Thank you so much, Chiara, for summing it so nicely. Then, well, if no one wants to follow up on this short bullet points from Chiara, then I have like another one, and that is, I think, more directed to Mariam. I think it's the question on how you act as a unit, meaning in terms of levels of autonomy. I think it's linked to the previous question, but it's also to, I mean, what is like the kind of your mandate? To what extent can you, are you waiting for specific demands or requests to come in? Or to what extent can I call it proactively intervene, or come up with saying like, hey, this is what we identify and we think it's good to work on that?
Yes, this is a super interesting and quite important question, actually, because we've tried different strategies. So I have feedback now on which ones work better. The initial strategy that we used was launching a call for projects and having administrations come to us with their projects, and then applying criteria on which projects to select and which ones to refuse. To be honest, this is the most comfortable scenario, because it means that we have the autonomy of choosing the topics, and we also have people who come with things they're really engaged about and they're asking for our help. We're not imposing anything on anyone. The second scenario is administrations don't go through the call for project, but write to us by email. And this means that they're super engaged, they really want our advice, etc. But it also means that sometimes we get projects that really are not addressable with behavioral insights because they're super structural. They're very, I don't know, tax related or regulation related, or not at all a priority for government's agenda, the one that we have to follow anyway. So this is a bit more tricky. When this happens, we do a meeting with the administration. We try to understand the problem a bit more, try to see if we can redirect them towards other resources like researchers or other consultancies. And if it does fit our agenda, we take the project. And then the third scenario is us going proactively to administrations and saying, look at what we did. There's a super interesting topic that you could work on that's very close to what we did. This can be sometimes good because we do identify topics that really would benefit from a behavioral approach. Where it gets tricky is when the administration is not necessarily super convinced, or the buy-in is not that big. And so we did come across a project like this where we pushed something, and given that they were not the ones initiating the demand, we struggled in keeping it till the end because they weren't, it was us coming to them and not them coming to us. So I would say the best case scenario, if you're starting a team, is try to showcase the use of BI, the importance of it, etc., as Chiara said, and then do a call for projects, which is a nudge in itself. Like, okay, you guys are coming to us, we're not coming to you. So inverting the charge.
Thanks, Mariam. Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Jose, I saw that you had your hand up previously, so if you still would like to come in, please.
Thank you, Nick. That's a small question for Harmik. You mentioned that you use a general survey also. My question is, did you actually decided on the question based on the sludge audit results? So you ask question to citizens where you found the components of the sludge, and if you did it before and after, if you're trying to use it in a way to quantify, this is very interesting to me. So please elaborate a bit if you can.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. They were slightly independent of each other. So the survey is a kind of the nationwide kind of a barometer on a wide range of topics, politics, public service, various things. But what we did is we included questions on quality of public services and specifically people's experience with public service in this nationwide survey to verify and bolster the results of the work we're doing on the public administration reform. So this was a separate stream, but it was helped us to inform the work that we're doing on public administration reform. And obviously then in the follow-up surveys that will be done in future, I think they are done every year or every 6 months, we will also include the same questions to assess any changes that might have happened. So it was independent from sludge, not involved in this specific audit, but overall we are using these surveys to gauge the effectiveness of the public administration reform activity.
Thanks a lot, Harmy. Very clear, and it's a very good idea to use the existing general social survey to ask questions about the services you are actually improving. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Other questions, dear colleagues online, dear participants? We have some questions still coming in via the chat. I just see one that is related to this level of institutionalization. Maybe Mariam already touched upon that one, but if some of you would like still to come in on this one, like what is the optimal level for nudging units to really transform administrations? That could be interesting. Yes, Chiara, please, on this one or anything else.
I'm happy to kick off on this one, and then please, colleagues, feel free to jump in. What's the optimal level of institutionalization? That's a very tricky one. My answer is it really depends. It depends on the jurisdiction you're dealing with. It's very difficult to generalize on what's the best model. what we could say, and you will find this in the logic publications that Cameron shared in the chat, is that it's a very good idea to start in the center of government with a small and agile team of experts, like the one Mariam is leading, or the one in Australia, for example, that Harmik referred to multiple times. This can really show value quickly at the top level of governments. But then more and more you advance with the maturity of uptake of behavioral science, the more you actually need less of a centered units, but more specialized expertise in the different line agencies. And so this is, for example, what happened in the Netherlands, where now, yes, they still have a smaller unit in the Ministry of Finance, so center of government, but then they have experts embedded in over 20 public administrations, from environment to transport to plenty of different areas, education, etc. And so this is a very good model. So I think it depends on the jurisdiction, but it also depends on the time dynamic and the maturity journey you're on.
Thank you, Chiara. Please, Hutch.
Just to use the opportunity to really thank for this very important and very practical session. And we were talking already with Nick that we need to really explore even deeper the opportunities, at least for the next year, how to embed this topic more into the service design and wider public administration reforms in the Eastern Partnership countries. And two aspects, at least, we were already discussing. One would be the institutional capacity building, and as you mentioned, Chiara, maybe for the countries that don't have this very high maturity enough, maybe working with the COGS, with centers of governments, to mainstream could be a nice start, and then we may be going with some implementation testing, also very beautifully presented by the French experience. And then when you reach certain level of maturity, then it is going in a decentralized manner. So I hope, Nick, we can discuss this further, and for the upcoming years, hopefully, fingers crossed, we might be able to then present also some more examples from the Eastern Partnership countries, how it worked with some of the pilots. Thank you.
Looking forward to doing this together, Raj, definitely, because there is a lot of useful ground to cover, definitely, and you can see to which excellent results this had led. There was also another question in the chat, I think related to the important element that Chiara mentioned, this value for money, and to what extent you always or often come to this really quantifying, I think, the values. There is a lot of, I think, sense making that people, being it from the administrative, political, but also the user side, can immediately see. But if you can also quantify into monetary terms, but also into like concrete gains of time, steps reduced, these things, I think that is a very strong not only research argument, but also really in practical terms to convince the future projects. Yeah, please, Miriam, on this or something else, please come in.
Yes, on this one, just to give you a very, very concrete example, on the study that I showed you on auto-entrepreneurs that we ran, we did a very precise calculation of return on investment, like financially, how much did it cost, how much did it bring, to give you a rough idea. So the project, when we brought on consultants, everything we used to do the project, the fieldwork, etc., cost us around 70,000 euros, and the money we return on investment was 687K. So just to show you, that's why I was saying that picking your first 10 projects is super essential, because those projects, if they have high return on investment, they are your best card to say, okay, look, this is exactly what it's worth. It's worth this much. It's not easy to do because it depends on the project. Sometimes you cannot quantify so precisely. These projects that are on taxes, on letters, on compliance, they're easy to quantify. That's why they're low-hanging fruits, and they're better to start with. The topics that I showed you on domestic violence, that would have been very difficult to quantify, because what are we going to quantify? I mean, we can. I mean, we could use econometric models and quantify, but it's absurd. So that's why picking the initial projects with experts that can help you pick those projects, like the OECD team that know this field super well, is really an advice I would give you. They're the ones that are, those projects are the ones that are going to help you, kind of get more and more funding. And so, yeah, a lot of our new funding now in our team has this criteria of return on investment. So the funding is every euro spent has to have a euro cashed into the government. So it changes the choice of topics as well.
Thank you, Mariam. Being cautious about the time and that we have used already more than we initially planned, I would just say, if there is like really a burning question from someone being online, or some final message that you colleagues in the panel would like to address, feel free to do so. Because if not, then I think it slowly becomes time also to start thanking all the colleagues, all the participants who were with us since this morning and who are stayed also throughout the whole morning with us. Then let me warmly thank you colleagues, speakers, panelists, for making yourself available at this really super busy period of the year. We know how busy your agendas are, so it's really highly appreciated that you had the time, made the time to prepare yourselves in such a wonderful way, but also being with us this morning. From the comments and the tone in the chat, we already see that this is highly appreciated by all. So also from our side, being it ourselves from the Sigma team, but also for sure from the GIZ team, we really highly welcome your availability and also your expertise. So with this, to Chiara, to Cameron, and to Eva, big thanks for always being such a great colleagues in the wider OECD. It's highly appreciated, and we look forward to continue and even deepen out this nice and good collaboration. And then also, Mariam, great to have you always available to present the French experience, which is a long-term one in really building up the whole unit, and then to do all these great things. So big thanks for that. Harmik, thanks a lot for getting all the insights from one of our key countries for the OECD Sigma team in presenting, I think, so nicely and neatly what you have been doing. And so all the best of luck to Armenia, but also in your private capacity and all the works that you're undertaking in the future in this regard. So thanks, dear colleagues, for being here. To all the participants, as said, we will bring all the materials together. We will publish, and once done and uploaded, you will receive a message where you can find all of the materials. Always feel free to reach out directly to us or to one of the colleagues. If possible, then for sure we will follow up. With all of this, wishing you a great continuation of the Friday, and hopefully soon to head into a wonderful and sunny weekend. So all best regards, dear colleagues, and take care and see you later. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
And huge thanks to you, Nick, and to Sigma for this great initiative and wonderful moderation. Have a great day.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.